All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Hopefully you guys can see me. I'm trying something crazy this morning because we're talking about internet security, and that totally makes sense with me sitting in a tree back here. I'm really hoping my webcam doesn't fall off in this fence post here. But anyway, welcome to another episode here. We've got a couple great guests for you. Tim Rout. Is it Tim Rout or Tim Roat? I'm so sorry, Tim.
Tim Rout, yeah.
Okay, so we got Tim from Access Parks here. He's going to talk to us a little bit about Wi-Fi security, all the great things that his business does at campgrounds and RV parks all around the country. I'm sure you've heard of him before. And then we're going to dive into some questions that Cara's got. I'm going to kind of let Cara lead this type of show. I've got some experience with internet security, viruses, malware, all that kind of stuff. And so she's kind of prepared a list of questions. But the reason I'm sitting up here to begin the show, I'm not going to stay up here the whole time, is because you can see there's a fence over here. And so what I want to explain to you is just kind of like internet security at its most basic fundamental level, right? When you're out there on the internet, whether it's your website or your computer systems or anything that's electronic and connected online in any capacity, whether it's your thermostat at home or anything like that, it's literally like there's more and more hackers and ransomware people every single day who are trying to infect your system to get control of it, to get information, to do whatever they want to do, even if it's just to use you as an entry point into another system that they want to get control of. And so not having viruses or virus protection, not having malware protection, not having ransomware protection, those kinds of things, is like sticking your head above the fence and not having any protection from a sniper who's out there trying to look for your system, hunt for things that have weak entry points. And so the very basic principle of security is to put a fence up between you and that hacker. Now that fence might not be the most sturdy thing in the world, but it's better than nothing. So Cara, take it away. What do we got?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I just first just want to say hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. But I really want to dive in quickly, specifically to concerns I know for myself as a former campground owner. I was often overwhelmed, frankly, by concerns specifically surrounding security for things like my point of sale campground reservation software. As well as obviously my on-site Wi-Fi system. We all kind of hear in the news all the time about security concerns specific to this and things like, we were talking right before the show started specifically about databases being held for ransom and things like that. Those are big concerns. I know in my case specifically, I was storing not only really kind of personal customer data in my database, like addresses and email addresses and contact information and all of that, but also in many cases, their payment information, credit card information, and that stuff, frankly, some nights kept me awake, concerned about how kind of vulnerable I felt. So I guess I'll start with asking specifically, maybe we'll dive in a little bit on the Wi-Fi side. Tim, maybe you can only specifically touch on Access Parks and your specific products, but I'm interested to hear about the security kind of protocols and things that are in place to protect those on-site systems for campground operators.
Yeah, absolutely, Cara, and thanks for having me on the show this morning. Very important topic. So there are a couple of different ways to look at security. One is sort of guest related, and the other is your business IT systems. And so, on the guest side, I'll talk about what the vast majority of parks do, and then talk a little bit about how you can get a little bit more advanced with security. But on a basic level, Wi-Fi at a campground is typically viewed in a similar way as Wi-Fi at a Starbucks or McDonald's or a library. It is inherently going to be insecure. It's going to have to be open. If you want people to get to a captive portal page, it doesn't have to be open, but most of the time people leave it unencrypted, which means WPA2. It has a password. So when you connect to the SSID, it immediately pops up a question saying, what's the password to connect to this network? That's the most secure for guest internet because, of course, that is encrypted from the Wi-Fi radio, wherever it is on a building or a pole, down to that client device. And so that's very, very secure. But most of the time, Parks will just leave it open with no password, just so people can get redirected very easily to a captive portal, enter a voucher code, sign up for service, and so on. So I think it's important to understand that the vast majority of hotspots out there are by nature unencrypted just from that last 100 meters from the radio to the guest device. And so, it really comes down to the user's browser. So most folks will look, before they go to a website or do anything with a website, they'll look in the upper part of the address bar, and they want to see that lock, right? That SSL encrypted lock. And what that does is encrypt it from the mobile device, the browser itself, using 128-bit SSL encryption, all the way through the internet to that server that's hosting that website. So that is also, really the most secure. So these days, if you do online banking or anything else that's remotely secure, you're going to be using SSL, and it's going to be automatic. And so that's why nobody's really worried. Not a lot of folks are really worried about the last 100-meter Wi-Fi encryption. Because they know the browser is encrypting it using when they're going to a website. You also want to make sure that your email is set up to use SSL encryption, and that's a whole different topic. But when you're just doing web browsing and banking, it is secure because of that SSL encryption in the browser. But you can take it another level, and you can implement that passcode, WPA2 passcode, and then redirect to a captive portal. And so that's another layer of security. And then on the business side, of course, we at Access Parks don't really deal a lot with business IT. We're more the consumer side. We provide a business connection to customers, but it's really up to the customer. It's up to the RV park to have a proper business IT system and IT consultants who can deal with all of the firewall issues, make sure that all the firmware is updated. That's all a completely separate piece from the guest side.
Yeah, that part's really fascinating to me too, because I think that stuff specifically is so daunting that it does contribute to this sometimes desire to keep away from things like online booking and really using the cloud-based softwares and things like that, because there's so much that comes along with it, so many concerns that frankly, as a layman, I know personally, it's incredibly overwhelming, and yeah, you really need those pros in place to provide support on that side. So I also really had a ton of concerns all the time with my campground website. I would get, phishing reservation requests through my website's booking tool or whatever. Either it would just be gibberish entered into the request field, and stuff. First of all, what does whoever is perpetrating that submission want? Why are they doing that? And second, how can you better secure your website against stuff like that? Maybe either of you pros on the call.
I don't know if you can say exactly what they want. I think that's dependent on who the person is. And I mean, it's all automated, right? Like, it's not an individual who's going to your website and manually typing in the contact forms 150 times in a row.
Right.
It's all done by bots.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe Tim has a better answer to the question of what they want, but I think how to prevent it is there's numerous different tools. Google's reCAPTCHA is one of them. And
Right.
again, it depends on, are you using that third-party system, RMS, CampSpot, Astra, something like that? And if so, then the spam, if it is coming from them, is on them to fix. It's nothing that you can do on your end.
Right.
But if it's a form on your website or something like that, then usually in most cases, especially if you build your site in WordPress, then it's very easy to add a plugin to do those kinds of things and kind of help stop that spam. It's kind of like an auto checker where Google verifies that person is or isn't the bot, and if they are, then it kind of gives them that. Well, the old version is that window thing, right? The choose the fire hydrant, choose the boat, the thing that annoys the heck out of everybody.
Yeah.
Just the way to kind of stop some of those things from coming through. So.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the the website form spam is really more of a nuisance. It's not typically the way that most hackers get into a business system. It is fairly isolated from all of your business IT usually. What most folks know in the security world, in IT security, is that you can be 100% or 99% secure on the IT side, but the vast majority of these ransomware attacks and phishing attacks are caused by your own employees. They're people, when your employee receives an email that they're not sure about the source, it asks them to click on a link, asks them to click on an attachment. That's how they get into your system. And that's usually the source of ransomware attacks. They will then start taking over that PC and any other PCs that are in your business. And they can lurk there for months, gathering data. And that's the scary part with ransomware, is it's not enough to back up your databases every day. They can actually lurk in there and start watching for sensitive data and take a lot of data hostage, months before you ever realize there's an issue, and they start demanding demanding a ransom. And so it's really a matter of educating your employees, as to IT security, and make sure you don't click on things you're not supposed to. You can also make sure that the latest antivirus software is installed on all of your devices, right? Because that is fail safe, and it will many times prevent somebody from, when they click onto those links, prevent the folks from getting in. So again, very important to have a business IT consultant who comes in and does all of this for you with the firewall and everything else.
Well, you're right, Tim. Like the Colonial pipeline here in the United States that was hacked was done through a weak user password.
That's right.
And that's how they got in and caused all the havoc they did, and the delays in gas and the whatever million, I don't know how much the FBI ended up recovering, but still millions of dollars that they ended up paying the hackers. All can be caused by that. So it is usually user error.
Yeah. There's some very basic steps that everybody should take. Very complicated passwords is one, because when they're trying to get your system, every 5 minutes for hours and days and weeks, they're just trying to guess your passwords. And unfortunately, most folks go for ease of use rather than security, and they'll even post that password on a Post-it note at the front desk, for all of their employees to see, or anybody else. So there are all sorts of ways you can stop that with on the human side. I would say that's where I would focus more than anything else. If you're using reservation systems and point of sale, they're typically encrypted all the way to the internet. It's highly unlikely folks are going to get into those systems if those software as a service platforms have done what they're supposed to do on the security side. I think it's really up to the RV park owner to make sure that their employees are educated on this stuff.
Wow. The Post-it with the password at the front desk, definitely have done that. Definitely.
Yeah. And most people use the same password for everything. So if a hacker gets into one of your websites, one of your logins, they're pretty much into everything.
Well, and so there are solutions around this, though. There are password managers that we use 1Password at our company. Dashlane, LastPass, things like that. Some of them are free, some are $10 a month, and they're little browser plugins that sit in Chrome or on your desktop as a Windows app or a Mac app, and they make having different passwords on every site much easier, because you can go to your bank website and it automatically fills in the password, and it's a 20-character random exclamation point thing that you don't ever have to remember. And so there are ways to do this without causing a ton of stress on you.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. We use LastPass, but of course, nothing is 100%. You still have to use a master password to unlock all of your other passwords. And if that master password gets distributed to all of your employees, you're back to square one.
Right. And so and so like for 1Password, we have Teams accounts where everybody has their own individual 1Password thing. But remembering one complicated password is easier than remembering 40.
So I suppose then what I'm hearing is some of my concerns were less valid than others. Suppose I'll ask you guys, what concerns should I have for my IT security stuff as a campground operator? What should I be concerned about?
I don't think that your concerns are any less or more valid. Like, it all depends on who you're being targeted by, right? Most campground owners, most small businesses in general, aren't big targets like Colonial Pipeline is, and Coca-Cola is, and CDC is, and the government, like all that kind of stuff. And so by its very nature, then you don't need to be as concerned, but you still should practice the basic tenets of security. So I think a lot of your questions are still valid. But I don't know, that's an open-ended question. You want to take that first, Tim?
Yeah, I would say, there are a couple things you can do. One is make sure that your IT system, your business IT system, is completely segregated from your guest network. So a lot of folks, unfortunately, run a flat network where it's the same virtual LAN for all of it, which means if a guest can get into that, as soon as they connect to your Wi-Fi, they then have access to your business IT systems. That's a big no-no. So you definitely want to make sure that your IT company sets up everything on different VLANs, employees on one, guests on another. Point of sale on another, perhaps. So that's a good way to segment out your network and make sure that folks can't get in there. But yeah, again, having the right firewall in place, in your business IT system. I wouldn't rely on your Wi-Fi company necessarily to focus on your business IT system. That's not really what they're there for.
No.
A lot of the time they'll say they'll do it, but that's not their forte. And so you really need a completely separate business IT consulting firm, to really go in and analyze all of what you have and make sure that it's all set up properly. Manage your passwords, manage your firewall, your antivirus on all of your PCs. So yeah, certainly a lot of concerns on the business IT side. I would just say less so on the guest side, just because of that browser encryption.
Right.
And there are all sorts of other advanced things you can do, right? So I can talk a little bit about what Access Parks does. What we do is we actually create a separate VLAN, a separate wireless network for every customer device or every customer. And so what that is actually a completely unique WPA2 passcode for every customer. So when they sign up for service, they get a unique code, they enter that in there, and then everything's encrypted from end to end. And they can even create their own little personal network on the larger network, so that if they're using something like a Chromecast that requires their devices to be on the same Wi-Fi network, or a printer, you'd be amazed at what you see out there now. These big rigs where people are working remotely, they've got printers they want to get on the Wi-Fi on the same network.
Right.
Chromecasts, all sorts of things. And so what you can do is create an encrypted personal network for that guest, and they put all of their devices into that. So there's some more advanced ways you can do it, but that's certainly not the vast majority of RV parks.
Fascinating.
Yeah, my video is great this morning, isn't it? The sun's like right behind my head.
Yeah. Mystery.
I gotta choose a better spot outside next time. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can go into that are advanced. And I mean, like a traditional firewall, like, yes, you can have an IT person do that, but if you're a legit hacker and you don't just call yourself that on Instagram, you can get through a firewall in 10 seconds. A basic like consumer one that you're buying at Walmart, or like that they're putting in a lot of these systems, right? And so that's what
I think I lost Brian's audio.
Yep, Brian's lost. He's gone.
I'm sure he'll be back.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have a message here from somebody asking me, what is pretexting? I have no idea what pretexting is. Should I Google it? Tim, do you know what pretexting is?
I haven't heard that term. I'm guessing it's sort of a takeoff on
like Tim who does.
Where you're calling somebody. We get these calls all the time, right? They claim that they're from your bank. Your account's been hacked. I'm going to need to get your account number, please, so we can fix it. That may be what they're referring to in pretexting, and that's just another example of how the human element here is, the vast majority of your problem. If somebody calls your employees and pretends to be from the bank, or pretends to be from your reservation system, let's say, they need to be very suspicious.
For sure. Yeah. It's so interesting to me to, like I said, the sheer like volume of data that accumulates in a reservation software program is so overwhelming to me to feel that kind of vulnerable. It takes a lot of trust in your software provider to just kind of give it up to them that they're going to be able to keep things secure and ensure that nothing's going to happen with your data. And I think at least in my experience with the companies that I worked with, they always did a great job of that. I didn't ever experience any sort of breach, but I did experience some interesting stuff specific to payments. I had the payment our payment processor had called me on a fairly regular basis. A few times a year, we would have the payment processor call and say, we often had folks request a booking through our website and then call us with a credit card number afterwards. And oftentimes that credit card number that was submitted over the phone, we then would have to key in to our payment processing device. And I learned through that experience that our payment processor was charging us a higher rate for those keyed in transactions because they were viewed as more risky. But we often had fraudulent credit cards used for that process. And that's interesting to me. Obviously they're kind of providing fake contact information or whatever when they're submitting that reservation request. But then, are they, and maybe you can't answer this, but to me, like, that person's not coming camping. I don't understand why they would process a transaction. Are they testing a card to see if it's going to work and be approved and go through?
Yeah, that's right, Cara. So now we're getting deeper and deeper into it, but there's something called the dark web, which doesn't appear, of course, on the the web that we know of, and it's really sort of a haven for fraudsters and credit card fraud and everything else. Right. And so obviously the FBI is very interested in the dark web, but there's a market on the dark web for stolen credit card numbers. But if you can prove that credit card is still valid in some way, by calling your RV park and trying to book a reservation, by calling Target, trying to book a $5 transaction, right. You validate that credit card number, and then it becomes much, much more valuable on the dark web. They can sell it to the highest bidder. Right. I believe they even have sort of tiered, ratings on stolen credit card numbers. So, I mean, the RV park is protected, of course. If it turns out to be fraudulent, you can just do a chargeback, with your credit card company. But I guess I would say one other thing is most of these issues are related to storing data, yourself at your RV park or on your servers. And so late in the last 10, 15 years, obviously, software as a service has really, really taken off. Call it SaaS, right? And what SaaS is you have nothing on your computer except for a web browser. You have no database, no nothing. All your interactions with the tools, the applications, the software is over the internet, over an encrypted 128-bit SSL encrypted connection. And when you're not storing credit card data, you're not storing customer data, there's really not much to worry about at that point. You're relying on the SaaS platforms, the SaaS companies, whether it's CampSpot or Staylist or ResNexus. You're relying on them to have the proper security, right? But you're in a way offloading much of the liability onto a third party. And now it's up to them to find the great IT folks who are going to build those firewalls and take all the protective steps. So I think there are ways that you can just pull the plug entirely and just run your entire business on SaaS. Don't store credit card data. That's just a transaction that goes back and forth to your processor, and all you see is the last 4 digits. Then you don't have to go through a PCI compliance process that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars because you're storing data. We have lots and lots of customers nationwide, very large operators who do store customer data so that they can easily recharge folks. And the PCI compliance process there is extremely expensive and onerous. I would recommend any park that can get away with not storing any data locally, do so.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a big, big factor in deciding between, that in-house data storage and the SaaS system, which is also fascinating to me because I think a lot of folks tend to want to maintain control and access to their data. So I think the the argument you're making is really valuable from a campground owner's perspective, to see it in that, from that perspective instead. I think, like I said, that data storage stuff really creates this feeling of vulnerability, and so to get away from that is definitely the way to go. I'm interested. We do have, and maybe this is a Canada specific problem, but we do have lots of parks who either don't have access to Wi-Fi at all, or they don't have access to sufficient Wi-Fi to be able to use software as a service as an option. Do you have recommendations for parks like that?
Get broadband. So, the FCC defines broadband as a minimum of, US FCC defines broadband as a 25 megabit per second download minimum, and 3 meg upload. And so we're always tying into fiber. We always deliver at least 25 meg symmetrical down and up to every guest device, not to the park itself, but to every guest device 24 hours a day. And the one reason we've been so busy the last couple of years is because of SaaS. A lot of parks are realizing that they want to run everything off of SaaS platforms, and you've got to have the bandwidth for it. Never mind, the fact that your guests really want broadband. That's what drives bookings. It drives ROI. But just from a business operations perspective, people really want broadband. One example. One of our partners, Xanterra, they run all the lodging in some of the biggest national parks. And so we operate all of their broadband at Grand Canyon and Yellowstone and Glacier National Park. These are places that up until, a year ago when we got there, they had almost nothing. It was just a DSL connection. You couldn't load a web page most of the day. Just a really shocking situation for some of our biggest national parks. And so, as we've rolled out broadband to all of these parks, they've taken advantage by converting a lot of their systems over to the SaaS platforms. And so now, same with KOA, they've got folks who are out now with iPads in the park doing express check-in on our Wi-Fi systems, which makes the guests very happy. They don't have to go to the front desk; they can just show up to the pad, and somebody comes out in a golf cart with their iPad and checks them in. But you have to have good Wi-Fi. Reliable Wi-Fi that meets a certain service level agreement, a certain minimum speed, and that's not something that most folks out there offer. But if you're in a remote Canadian park or a remote park anywhere, you are going to be limited by satellite or DSL, and you may not be able to go to a SaaS model on that. But I will say, if you have the proper business IT folks, they will, of course, prioritize your traffic over guest traffic. So even if you have a really slow 5 megabit per second DSL connection, which we never recommend for any RV park to use DSL or cable or satellite, unless it's just for your business operations. If you're trying to offer Wi-Fi to your guests over that, while also running your business network, you can forget about it. That is just never going to work unless you have a really good business IT consultant who can make sure that your traffic for the point of sale system and business systems are all prioritized, and then whatever's left over, the guests get, which they're probably going to get almost nothing on in that case. But at least then you can run a business. At least then you can run a business IT system. So I do get it. There are folks out there who have to make that sort of zero-sum calculation. Are we going to offer some service to guests, or are we going to keep that for our business operations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough scenario for sure to be in. So yeah. I have a question here too. How secure is the cloud-based CRM system really? So I think you did kind of already touch on that specifically about the ability of these companies to really address those problems. They have all the pros in-house to do the things that to address the problems that are really overwhelming for us campground operators who are focusing typically our energies on things like the guest experience. But if you can touch specifically on that, how secure is a cloud-based CRM system?
Well, I would say they're very, very secure. That's not really an area that you really should be focusing too much concern on. Partly because they're just using SSL encryption, which is one port on the internet, right? So port 443 is the SSL encryption that your CRM system uses in your web browser to encrypt everything end to end. Right. Where you run into some trouble, you've probably heard in the recent past, the SolarWinds hack. There's some other business IT systems that get hacked all the time. They're exposing many, many ports to the internet, and not all of those ports are secure, and all it takes is a hacker doing a scan and seeing what ports are open on your network or your firewall, and they can take advantage of almost any port that's open. Whereas the CRM system is just using that 443 encrypted port. So I would be more concerned with again the human element, just the logins. If somebody can penetrate a PC that one of your employees is using, they can watch every keystroke and figure out what all the passwords are. It's called a keystroke logger. And if they can get that installed on somebody's PC because an employee clicked on a link or an attachment, they're now seeing every keystroke that employee makes throughout the day. And they're going to get every password. So.
Oh. Hi, Brian. You're back.
Am I finally? Like, I keep seeing myself in the back end, and I think I'm back, and then I talk to you, and nobody answers me. So
you're back. Hi.
You're back.
Bouncing between my home internet and my hotspot, and I don't know. Anyway, so good. I'm back.
Speaking of Wi-Fi,
I could hear you guys the whole time. Like, I could see myself. I just don't know why I wasn't showing up. So anyway,
crazy.
Good talk so far.
Well, welcome. Welcome. Do you have any input on the stuff we talked about that you missed out on?
Well, what I was trying to say, I think when I first got disconnected is Tim's right about SaaS. You can offload a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it's easier. Like way back when we first started doing marketing or tech or whatever we were doing for campgrounds, we were getting people off of the @Gmail addresses in 2009, 2010, and trying to give them their own @mycampground.com domains. And so in the beginning, we were doing this all on cPanel servers. And what I found by doing that for a couple of years is that I had to manage all the security. I had to install all the spam filters and all the things, and my clients were getting a lot more crap in their inboxes than they would otherwise. And so we ended up moving everything and started using G Suite, probably 2013, 2014, which is Google's service. And yes, it cost the park owners money versus us. We were folding it into our services, but what it did is just basically allowed me for $5 a month for each email address to offload the security to Google, who spends millions of dollars a month on this stuff. And it makes sense. It's more reliable. It's less spam. You don't have to do any of the work. I don't have to do any of the work. And so, there's simple ways that you can offload some of that stuff without making it more challenging.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can lower your risk substantially by letting those multi-billion-dollar companies manage your security for you. Absolutely.
Right. And so we're all worried that, of course, Google's a bigger target, but that's why Google's spending millions of dollars a month on security, because they know they're a bigger target. So. Right.
But even from a legal perspective, if you've got a SaaS provider, CRM, Google, anybody managing your SaaS platforms, it does mitigate a lot of your risk on the hacking side if there is a data breach. That said, most folks should carry proper insurance for IT, sort of the hacking attacks.
Yeah, there is cybersecurity insurance. We've got it. I think we either had it or I couldn't get it where I was in Ohio at the time through my provider, but I've looked into it too. But some of the other things,
sorry, I was going to ask specifically about cybersecurity insurance. Is it cost prohibitive? Or maybe you don't have that answer, but
I think I was quoted I don't know, maybe $10, $20 a month, something like that.
Yeah, it's not expensive.
Wow. Nice. That's fabulous.
And some of that depends on whether you're actually storing data. So if you're not storing any data, your premium comes down quite a bit. Yeah, and there are ways I heard Tim talk about, and this is going back a little bit, sorry, from when I missed, but I heard Tim was talking about credit cards and storing that data because people's ability to recharge them is easier. But you can do that. There's hybrid models of that. Like we do that with our checkout store. We have WooCommerce where people buy our marketing services on our website. It all integrates with Stripe. So Stripe stores all that data, but through Stripe's API, I can still recharge people whenever I need to. So there's ways that you can have the best of both worlds. That's right. Yeah. And Stripe is the one who had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be PCI compliant, go through all the monitoring and everything else. So, yeah.
And that stuff again comes down to this type of knowledge and awareness for operators is really interesting, because the first thing I always hear when we talk about using Stripe and things is, oh, the rates are too high. Well, sometimes you get what you pay for. There are implicit benefits and reasons for why those rates are the way that they are, and you're getting incredible value, in my opinion, for that expense, specifically because of these things. And I don't think that is common knowledge, and should be. We got to spread the word.
And I think some of the discrepancy, though, is again, a lot of not just park owners, but small business owners in general aren't paying attention to these things like IT and stuff like that. And so there is no expense to compare Stripe to. And so, yes, you've got your payment, obviously your credit card percentage fees, but they're lower for a reason and Stripes are higher for a reason, because Stripe offers more services and integrations and security and all those kinds of things that other people don't do. But when you're a campground owner, you're coming from a 1% fee, just making up something for credit cards, and you're not doing anything with PCI compliance, and you're not concerned about firewalls and all those kinds of things that could get hacked from a credit card perspective, then you've got nothing to say like you don't understand the justification because you haven't done the research or it's not your wheelhouse. Like, you're running a campground, you're not an IT person.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're seeing a recurring theme here. Try to outsource as much as you can. Don't store any data. Yeah, you get what you pay for in terms of security. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, there's oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead, Cara, please.
I was just going to say there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. And like Brian said, I think utilizing the pros, the folks that really get it, is logical and worth every penny.
Yeah, and along those lines, Cara, I would say that what we see in our industry, less and less so these days, but we see a lot of park owners doing DIY IT, we call it. And maybe their son is in charge of IT, or their brother-in-law, and they went out and bought a bunch of Ubiquity radios, and now they're a wireless ISP. In their eyes, and it's sort of what we sometimes refer to as the Dunning-Kruger effect. People don't know what they don't know, so they assume they know everything there is to know about that subject. But there's an enormous amount to know about security and Wi-Fi and broadband and IT and firewalls. It's a massive industry, obviously. And when we see DIY type systems that may be very cheap, you start to get a little concerned with how it's been set up. Not just from a performance perspective, they almost always can be a lot better performance-wise, but on the security side as well. Sometimes there's a checkbox that says isolate all Wi-Fi client devices from each other on the Wi-Fi network, and that's not checked. So now you've got one guy in an RV who can reach the other guy's devices, across the street. Things like that. But there are dozens, even hundreds of issues like that a DIY setup may not take into consideration.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's just it's an education, and it's a balance between once you have that education and you understand it, whether that comes from you reading or watching YouTube videos or learning on your own, or having a grandson who actually works for an IT company and isn't, instead of just says they do, or it's a hobby, or you're learning from a show like this, from myself, from Tim, from what Cara's experienced at her park. Once you have that education and you start to learn all the things that go into it, then all of a sudden that value prop for paying a little bit more to outsource becomes worth it.
Exactly.
And I think once what we also see is sometimes when it is a DIY system, they do that for several years and they start learning and moving up sort of the learning curve a little bit, and eventually they reach the point where they start to realize what they don't know, and that's when they're like, oh, wait a second, we need to bring a managed service provider. And
that's what I was saying. I mean, that's what I did in 2009. I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I was running it on cPanel because I thought I could do it all myself.
Right.
And I could, but it was just way more work than I could keep up with. And so, yeah, I still learn every single day. I'm sure you do.
Right. And not to sound cynical, Brian, but there are many organizations out there whose business model is based on an inexpensive solution for a DIYer. And it's not the most robust system, and it's not going to have the performance. But they've got great marketing teams, and they'll convince you that this is all you need. You can do it yourself. And I think that mentality sort of permeates the internet in general. People want a DIY, but RV park owners in particular, they're used to going out there and getting their hands dirty and doing a DIY system, and so sometimes they fall prey to folks out there who are just selling them the lowest quality product with the highest markup, and not necessarily all the latest and greatest in terms of performance or security.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So you really want a managed service provider, in our opinion anyway, that's the best model, somebody to manage everything end to end, from your fiber connection all the way to the end user device. Better to outsource that, let your folks focus on what they do best, which is guest satisfaction.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Bringing
So
the pros.
let's talk about some basic steps though that these park owners can take on their own, right? Like to avoid, because we talked about ransomware, but ransomware is all ransomware is a form of malware that allows an external party to literally encrypt all of your files on your computer and hold it for ransom. And so it's one type of malware, but it's something that you should be protecting yourself against. And so we talked about briefly about antivirus. There are tons of, just like we're talking about saving money, right? And DIYing it yourself. You can get free antivirus from anywhere. The problem with 98% of, and I'm just making up a percentage, right? But it's high, of antivirus software in general is that it's all reactive. Find the virus, study the virus, create a way to clean the virus up, launch it into the antivirus program, somebody downloads the update, now you're protected months later. That doesn't do anything for you. Like nothing. So use a proactive system, and these exist out here, right? Like on my computer, I've used Sophos before, which is a UK firm that has artificial intelligence built in that looks for patterns of malware, viruses, ransomware, and things, and stops them before they need an update to say that this specific one was discovered in the wild. And it's cheap. Like Sophos Home, which you can use for your business computers, is free. Cylance is another one that I'm using right now, which is another artificial intelligence one. It's super lightweight. It's like, I don't know, $20 or something a year, $30 a year, something like that. But again, it's proactive. It's not reactive.
Yeah, in some cases you will get what you pay for, though. I would say, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. When people start seeing free systems out there, I would go back to what I said earlier. Get a business IT consultant and let them manage these systems, because even if you find a good antivirus platform, it's sort of like the Wi-Fi business, right? In telecom, you can't just install it and forget about it. These are things that require daily maintenance, monitoring, upgrades. It is absolutely a constant process to make sure that these systems work correctly. And I think that's a common misconception in the industry. Even in the Wi-Fi business, we have folks who think they can spend $50,000 on some boxes, some radios, put them up, and they're good for 5 years. And that's just not the case in the telecom business. Certainly not with any enterprise-grade telecom company. And it's the same thing with security. If you install, even the latest, greatest, antivirus, or even a cheap one, they do require constant upgrades and maintenance to be effective. Even from a settings perspective, your business needs are going to change on a regular basis, and you may want to adjust some of the security settings. And so you really want somebody who knows what they're doing. Dealing with that. There really is no, sort of click here to install and forget about it for 5 years.
No, I 100% agree with you, and I'm not arguing against outsourcing anything, but I'm saying at a most basic level, if you're going to take step one today, something that you can do without going through the outsourcing and all that kind of stuff, and maybe build up to that.
Yep.
Then install some of these, like Sophos, yes, is free, but Sophos is free because they have a gigantic enterprise IT system that's worldwide that they make millions and millions of dollars off of, and so they're offering Home for free because they don't need the profit. But it uses the same AI that their hugely ridiculous, expensive enterprise thing does.
Right.
So,
yeah. No. Better to use something. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
So what's step 2?
Step 2 beyond that, I mean, a good backup probably for your computer would be my next thing. Because that's going to help protect you against ransomware, but don't back it up on your local server. Back it up on a cloud somewhere. I'm trying to remember. What the name of the backup. Acronis is the one we use. Acronis Cloud Backup, and so it syncs to different places on the cloud. So if you get a ransomware that they're encrypting your system, you can restore it from that cloud backup, and it's gone.
That's a good idea. And then, of course, if you do insist on keeping files locally, better to use a SaaS-based drive like Dropbox or Box or Google Drive. Certainly, people will store local copies on the PC, and that can be susceptible to hackers. Absolutely. But at least you've got built-in backup. So this happened to us actually on one of the folders. Somebody actually accidentally deleted one of our folders off of a cloud-based system, cloud-based drive. It was one click. You go back and say, okay, just retrieve it from yesterday. You know, and that's a huge peace of mind, knowing that those companies are backing that stuff up almost on an hourly basis in these massive data centers. And if something happens, you can rewind the clock. You can go back, an hour, you can go back a couple days, you can go back a month. So that is another, secure way to keep your files in the cloud.
And we've heard then the counter argument to that, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but the counter argument is, what if the cloud service goes down, or what if the cloud service gets hacked, or whatever? And so, like, for our business, and this is more complicated than a campground owner probably needs to do. But what we did and what we do at our small company is we use a NAS, network attached storage, which is from a company called Synology. You just buy it and it backs up, like, it's a huge storage system to store all your files, but then it also can take those files locally and also sync them in real time to Dropbox or Google Drive or to Amazon storage or whatever else. So then you've got your local files that's protected, but you've also got a cloud copy that syncs in real time. So then you're covered both places.
Absolutely, yeah. Most experts will suggest you keep your files, and if you're going to keep files, keep them in 3 separate places, right? It's going to be your PC, because for ease of access, it's going to be that NAS storage, that hard drive you bought from Costco or whatever. The 50 terabyte hard drive that's attached, or in the cloud. That's, as Brian said, they have NAS storage in the cloud, and then also the cloud service like Dropbox or Box. So
that's what we did. We had the NAS storage that was local. It was a box that sits on the shelf with 8 hard drives in it. They're 8 TB each, right? But then that software that runs on the NAS has the ability to connect to Dropbox and sync it to there to back it up to Amazon or Dropbox or wherever you want. So it's counterintuitive, right? People say you need 3 separate copies for data integrity, but what does that do? It also increases your exposure. Now you've got 3 separate places that all your data is stored. So if somebody gets into your PC, they've got your PC data, then they can get into your NAS storage device, maybe much more easily than they would have been able to penetrate Dropbox or Google Drive. You just don't know. Right. So there are all these trade-offs people have to make. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what type of business you're running too, right? I'm not a bank, so I'm fairly comfortable. Like, if they want photos from our clients from 2009 that I took when I was
yeah.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And I guess that goes back to the original point, which is if you don't want any exposure, don't keep any data anywhere.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me. Like I said, I actually had sleepless nights about the amount of data we hadn't stored. This was prior to switching to a cloud-based system, but and that was the main reason why I was very tired. We did eventually switch, and that did give me a lot of peace of mind. But I did still feel like Brian was saying, consistently, like, what happens if something happens to the cloud-based system? And now, all my data is there. And we did have days where, something would go wrong. And now, I have people showing up to check in, and I don't have a property grid to check people in on and things like that. So, there's all these, like I said, trade-offs, and it's all about kind of measuring the sacrifices and level of risk.
You're never going to solve everything. You're never going to solve everything. And so if it was me, and this is just my opinion, right? This is what I would be doing as a campground owner. I'd be running a smart antivirus, so probably Sophos, because Cylance is good, but Sophos has like all the extra things, like it protects against keystroke loggers and tells you if someone's trying to access your webcam, and it's free. You can't beat that.
Right.
You can put it on your phone too. So I would have Sophos. I would have cloud-based backup like Acronis or something like that that's similar, that backs up off-site to protect me from ransomware. And then I'm pretty good against viruses, malware, and ransomware. I'm comfortable with that. And then after that, I'd make sure my website is secure. I'd make sure that whoever's running my website, because WordPress is a big attack vector. Like, maybe you're not concerned about your website because maybe it doesn't process those credit cards, but if somebody decides to hack your website and put something crazy up on the front page, they can damage your reputation pretty quickly. So just make sure that whoever's doing your website is protecting you with we call it a web application firewall, but we do it for all of our clients, and just nobody knows it exists. Nobody knows what it does, but we know what it does, and we know it protects clients. So we do it, and we eat the cost. But that's it. And then and then, like Tim said, outsource the remainder of
Whatever.
whatever you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you. Yeah, exactly. And just one example I was going to mention. One of our customers is a big nationwide brand that you would have heard of. They run their entire reservation system off the cloud, right? They have the application actually running on Amazon Web Services, AWS. Very secure platform, right? AWS hasn't shown any security vulnerabilities really. All they have at their park is a screen. It's called, what's called a thin client. It doesn't even have a hard drive. Its sole purpose is to communicate over the internet back to the Amazon Web Service, to the cloud, to where the reservation system is. And there's literally no data being stored because it's not even possible. All they have is a thin client where the reservation agents are working, and that's it. So that's a very secure system. As far as whether AWS can be hacked or Dropbox or Google Drive, I have not heard any situations where folks have lost their data there, at least not permanently, just because they are spending so many billions of dollars on data centers around the world, backing up everything in multiple places and being able to rewind, back an hour or a day or a month. I don't know, maybe Brian has. I haven't heard of anybody in the cloud being.
No, I haven't heard of anybody losing their data like that, but
Yep.
assume nothing is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Like, if again, the 3 points of restoration, right? Like, it's the same reason we had our NOS and we had Dropbox and we had it backing up to Amazon in 2 different locations, one in Ireland, like in real time.
Yeah.
Just because I assume nothing. Like, just because Amazon spends millions on security doesn't mean they're not going to get hacked tomorrow by some kid who wakes up and decides he wants to have fun today.
Sure.
Easy. It's not hard.
Well, and going back to your other suggestion of using a network attached storage, basically an external hard drive, Brian, that can be a very secure system. The way I would use it, if you want to be absolutely 100% secure, is you back up manually every day and then unplug the hard drive. It would have no constant connectivity to your PC, which has connectivity to the internet. So if you just, back in the old days, we used to do it with DVDs, right? We'd put the DVD in there and it had all that storage capacity and you could back everything up on there. And then you put it in a safe, and you had a hard copy of all your data. People don't do that anymore. It's all, external hard drives. Like, you can back it up to the external hard drive, every few days, every week, and then just unplug it. That's a very secure way to keep your files if you're going to keep files.
Yeah. So, yep, 100% agree.
Yeah.
What else you got, Cara?
I don't know. We've come to the end of this specifically. I think I appreciate the confidence you experts have in all of this. The confidence in the security and safety is valuable. I don't know if maybe I'm a fear monger with it, but I
wouldn't call myself an expert. I'm more confident. I don't know if I'm confident ever, because the possibilities are endless, right? I'm far from an expert on security, but I've done my basic research and I feel confident enough. And maybe in 10 years, I'm going to look back on this and be like, I was a total idiot. What was I thinking, right? But for now, yeah, I continue reading, I continue learning, and I just try to educate myself as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do is just stay up on all the latest threats as much as you can. But again, I feel strongly that private RV parks, almost any business really should be bringing in a managed service provider to worry about all these things for them. You're just never going to have enough hours in the day.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. This part alone feels like a full-time job. The consistent monitoring and updating and keeping everything running in that kind of well-oiled machine way is so necessary for not just your own, like, your business safety, but your guest and data protection stuff is so valuable.
It's just like with everything else. You have 3 choices: not do it, do it, or do it well. That's it. And it's with everything. It's not just with internet security. It's with marketing. It's with Wi-Fi systems. It's with all of the things that you do. Hiring employees. It just depends on what your choice is at your park.
Yeah. And people worry inordinately about the IT side. I would go back to what I said earlier, which is, pay attention to the human side. Make sure you know what your employees are doing with passwords. Make sure you're changing passwords all the time. Make sure they know not to click on things they don't recognize. Their online courses, YouTube, whatever. Put them through a 15-minute phishing introduction, on a YouTube video, whatever you can do to close that gap, because that really is where the vast majority of these issues come up.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to discuss adding that to a training resource. Specifically, I think that's a big step that campground operators should add into their strategy. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what you know as a park owner, which in some cases is bigger because you're outsourcing, in some cases it's smaller because you haven't done any education at all because you just know the time. Think about what you know or don't know as a park owner. Your employees that you're hiring know 98% less than you do. Right. And so just providing them that simple piece of education on what to look for and what not to do is a good first step. And then when you get to the point where you're outsourcing, like Tim has suggested, and yeah, I'm suggesting too, you look at some of the more advanced things like Sophos does for enterprise that an IT person can set up for you. And email filtering is one of them on top of Google, even if you're still using that, where it would literally, the system we used to use for endpoint would find a malware email and it would delete it before anybody could even see it. Wouldn't put it in spam. It would recognize that it was malware and it would delete that file and that attachment. And so there was no chance of human error. So there are systems that solve this problem too.
Wow. Just have to know what to look for, which is a whole other ball game.
The first step is being cognizant that it exists and then concerned enough to take action. And then 1, 2, 3, ignore it, do it, or do it well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's fascinating. It's a big part of, like Tim said, really running any business these days, especially for sure. That connectivity is incredibly valuable, but also comes with some vulnerability for sure.
I want to talk about one more thing before we leave, just because this is maybe up Tim's wheelhouse a little bit. There was a question in one of the groups, I think it was maybe Mark Kep's group the other day, where somebody was asking about privacy and how do I worry about my ISP getting me for somebody downloading pirated content or doing something illegal on my Wi-Fi network. And there's no real way to prevent that 100%. But what I told them was stop letting your ISP spy on you and use your own DNS. And so I gave him the 1.1.1.1 from Cloudflare and told him to put that in his router. What do you think of a service like that, Tim? Because you deal with Wi-Fi. Not that specifically, but using different DNS to protect yourself privacy-wise.
Well, I would say that peer-to-peer downloading, file sharing, BitTorrent kind of stuff, it's a huge problem in the industry. The copyright issues are just massive. As a telecom company, we are somewhat insulated from that. According to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, we're not responsible for anything that transits over our pipes. Right. However, it's sort of a gray area, right? So as an ISP, we have all these fancy systems that allow us to track, potentially who is, violating copyright or committing copyright infringement, and we're required to trace them down and disconnect them, blacklist them, as they say, and you can only do your best. People use VPNs and so on to do BitTorrent, and then you have no idea what's happening, but. Certainly it's all part of having a proper managed service provider manage that for you, because if you're not responding back to HBO and Time Warner and all the other folks properly, every time they notify you there was a violation on your network, they will shut your ISP off. And that's not something a park wants. And so it's another example of how a DIY, system may not have the proper tools in place to be able to fight that and combat that threat. But it is one of the biggest problems, facing ISPs is how to walk that line between letting people do whatever they want to do within the law, but also abiding by federal law, which says that we have to have the tools in place to be able to track that kind of stuff down. And you can take it to the next criminal level, right? If somebody's doing some really illegal things on your network, downloading images or videos that are illegal. You're also required to have that capability to track down who that person is, find their IP address, find their device, because when the FBI comes and subpoenas you, you better have it, because you're required to do that under the law. And we've never seen any sort of smaller RV parks that do DIY IT actually pay attention to any of that. So.
Right, and so this is a multi-pronged thing, right? And wow, my video is terrible today, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like literally right behind my head, the sun is. So anyway, but it's a multi-pronged thing. Like yes, I understand the dangers that are posed by the things that you just went into, right, Tim? And I'm not suggesting that this is a system that you use to avoid the scrutiny or to protect people who are doing illegal things. But it's been well established, Congress has allowed it and stuff like that, that your ISP, and many people don't even know this, literally knows every website that you're going to visit and logs it and can track it and look at it. And so just from a pure privacy perspective, it's sometimes better, at least in my opinion, to use your own DNS service like Cloudflare provides that deletes all this stuff after 24 hours and avoids that whole kind of thing. So is it in some ways possibly protecting somebody who's doing something illegal? Maybe. Does it absolve you of that responsibility like you were saying? No. But it maybe gives you a little bit of peace of mind.
Well, I understand there are a lot of privacy concerns. I would say, having been in the telecom industry as an ISP for 20 years, I can tell you the ISP does not care what you're browsing to, unless they get a subpoena from the FBI, and then the ISP better have the tools in place to abide by CALEA, which is the act that requires you to be able to find illegal actors. But certainly, if you're concerned about privacy, yeah, the VPNs are very inexpensive. Go ahead and download one. And I can tell you that there's almost no way to get through it. The ISP will not be able to see what's happening. ISPs typically see statistics. They see, what are the top websites visited by guest devices. And if you want to drill down into a deeper layer, you can find the IP address. Maybe you can find the MAC address. And then you might have to blacklist somebody who's committing illegal acts. But they don't know who you are typically. It's almost impossible to track. It's very difficult to track all of that back to an individual user most of the time. But I can tell you, I've never heard of an ISP caring, what websites.
No, I don't think they do either. I'm more concerned with the fact that they can legally sell my data to advertisers. That's where my behavior, and they do. They very much.
Well, and that's not an IT. That's not an IT question. That's just it's in the terms and conditions.
And again, that's why I pivoted and saved it to the end. Right, it's a privacy thing. So.
Yeah. No, you absolutely should pay attention to privacy policies with your ISP, with anybody, even the cloud SaaS providers, the folks who do your reservation systems. What can they do with your email address? Can they sell it to other folks in the industry? All of that is in the fine print that nobody ever reads in those privacy policies.
But they do have a lot of privacy is security in some ways, and so you have to pay attention to both of them.
Yeah.
Sure. Very
Absolutely.
interesting.
That's all I got. I think we're over. So get out of here.
Yeah. No, I want to
my video shot next week.
yeah, better. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us today. Really always appreciate your expertise and knowledge, and specifically, love what Access Parks is doing. So, always happy to have conversation with you whenever we can fit it in.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. It's always a pleasure. Always interesting discussions. Always good to geek out and talk about IT.
Good.
So.
All right, it's good to see you, Tim. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you. What are we doing next week, Cara? What's next? I don't even know what's next week. Do we have a plan?
We're still in the process of sorting some things out for next week.
So we don't have a plan. Yeah. That's what I mean. We will soon, though. All right,
take
care, guys.
We'll see you next week.
All right, bye.
Thanks.